All right, back. Transferring onto our clay, did onto a foam square. So my original form that I want to work with, I'm going to now flip it so that the smaller side is on the bottom, and very carefully stand up and try and center it inside of this transferred area. So I usually look on all sides. Sometimes I spin my foam just to make sure that it's even on both sides. If you need to move it, lift the form up completely so you don't smudge your transfer. Okay, so I think I'm pretty good. So I'm going to stand up, move this a little bit so you can see it better. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to push down and kind of rock in all directions. Don't push too hard because you don't want this wooden form to break your clay. So I've pushed it down. I'm now going to put another board on top and I'm going to flip it. It's hard to see on camera, but this is it getting flipped. Take the foam off and boom. I'm going to push this down gently first with my hands. And are smoothing it. I don't often come in for sponge. Please do not use a wet sponge. You could use a damp sponge. But I saw a few little imperfections and I wanted to smooth them out. So basically what I'm doing is I'm pushing the clay down so that it hugs the mold. I usually do it with a red rib. And you want to make sure and get your edges. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now we just have to put the foot on it. I have to take my finger and just make sure that the edges are smoothed. Careful though, you don't want to smudge. The transfer is very fragile right now. Alright, so there we go. I'm going to push this aside for a few moments. I'm going to work on the foot. So I'm taking these scraps that I told you to save. And I'm going to start cutting the foot out. Make sure they're nice and smooth. So you want the clay for your foot to be the same moisture level as your actual platter. So super important to save these scraps. If you don't have the scraps and you roll out another piece of clay, that piece of clay will be wetter than your original form. So you don't want to do that. This is a foot maker. It looks like a corn cob holder, but it's actually a foot maker. And what you do is you hold the clay strip down. I want you to see this. Hold it and just pull it through. The bottom of this foot maker should be in contact. It looks like this foot maker was bent. At some point it was bent. So I'm going to try and unbend it. Opening it up a little because this was very narrow. That's a very narrow foot for that. Okay. Hopefully that worked. Let's try it again. And you're usually not going to be able to get a piece that will run the entire plate or the entire form. So we just make a few. Push this back in here, and I'm going to start the foot process. I'm going to get my serrated rib, give myself a scoring line. You want to score the top of the plate before it drops down to the side wall. Make sure it's scored well, because of course this is what's going to hold the foot on. Once that's done, this is what the foot looks like. It's skinny on the top and wide on the bottom. We're going to score the bottom. Well, and now we're going to apply some water, which is applied to the plate itself and to the foot. There we go. So you want to go around your corners. If you see some cracks forming, just smooth them out. You're putting a little bit of pressure on here, but not much. You're sealing up your edges. Notice I rounded the corner because you don't want your foot to end at the edge. You want to travel around with it. So I'm going to do this next one. And when I lay the next one, I overlap, so one on top, not by a lot, round the corner. Make sure you get those corners set up. Looking good. And then this overlap, you're going to cut diagonally. Take your little pieces out, and then score these together. And they should line up pretty good. You don't want to flatten this too much. Be really careful when you're smoothing this foot out. I'm going to use my rib to make sure that this join is even. I'm just filling in. It was like a little weird little dent over here, so I just filled it in with a tiny little patch. Alright, running your fingers along the edges on both the inside and the outside to really seal that beautifully. If you don't seal it well, the air will get in there and it'll pop your foot off. Okay, so one more. Hopefully that's big enough. Let's try it. Wipe this guy off, and let's pull another one. So plates that are small will only need one foot, but plates that are a little bit bigger, such as the one I'm working on right now, they'll need a secondary support. So I'll show you what that means in 1 minute. I'm going to cut this diagonal. Join. Smooth it out so it connects well. Barely, just gross. right, so you definitely want to just give it a little bit of pressure, not a lot, and then seal your edges. You see I just dipped my finger in water, not a lot of water, but enough to just sort of blend all of this together. Looking good. Take my sponge, give it a little smoothing. You just have to be really careful not to put pressure on the top of the foot because then you'll shrink it down. I see that happen a lot. And then the foot thickness becomes uneven and your plate doesn't sit well on the table. So you want to really try and keep it even in height. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to do one more because, as I said earlier, a longer plate needs more support. If this was a small plate, I could just leave it at that, but it's not, so I'm going to give it one more support. That's not big enough. I'm going to use one of these. Nope. This way. Okay, go. Cut one more foot. It's not going to be as long because it's just for the center part. Perfect. Go ahead and give this guy a score. And then I'm going to put a middle connection here. This foot goes this way at a diagonal, so I'm going to cut at a diagonal inward. Give this guy some water, aka slip. And I'm ready for my middle connection. So this is why we cut it at a diagonal, at an angle, so it fit that. I'm going to slide it over. Score this. I just laid it down with a little bit of water on the back so I could see where I needed to score the actual main base, which was right there. And I'm going to cut the other side at a diagonal as well. Give it a little pressure, make sure it's straight, of course, and then start sealing my edges. All right. Now, once the foot is completed, all it is cleaning this up. So one of the things that I like to do on here is take a rubber tip tool. That's this guy. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes, and I'm just going to seal my connections. All the way around. Some people like the line that it leaves. I'm usually not crazy about this line that it leaves, so I'm going to come back, I'm going to come back in with a paintbrush. The exterior as well. If you kind of drag it on its side like that, it doesn't leave much of a line.